video, we're going to look at loan data analysis using pivot tables. We are going to formulate and test a series of hypotheses about the loan data using pivot tables. Pivot tables allow us to quickly summarize thousands of records. Each pivot table should appear in a separate worksheet. Rename each worksheet to match the bold titles. Add a title to each worksheet and repeat the hypothesis, offering your own assessment as to whether it is supported in a text box. Professionally format the results. So I'll do the first one and then leave the others to you. The first one is checking on grade versus rate. The question is, does the grade of the borrower determine the interest rate? Our hypothesis is that higher grade borrowers receive lower interest rates. So let's go to the data and start. The data is over here on the Loan Stats tab. And the instructions here say to convert these loan stats to a table, then make separate pivot tables to address each hypothesis. Rename the worksheet for each pivot table. So to convert this to a table, I'm going to click anywhere in the table. Don't highlight the table, just click anywhere in it. I'm going to go over to the Tables tab and then click here on the table formatting, any one that I want, and now it's formatted as a table. I'm going to click back again in the table and you can see that all the drop-down arrows have appeared. Now we're going to start creating our pivot tables. And on a Mac, the pivot tables exist under the Data tab, and there's Pivot Table. There's the big square for Pivot Table, but there's a little drop-down next to it, which is the one you want, because that allows us to manually build the pivot table as opposed to automatically. Create manual pivot table, and take all the defaults. They're fine. Here's our pivot table builder. But before we get started, we'd like to bring in the question that we're trying to answer. So I'm going to make room for the question here by highlighting in the gray areas on the 1, 2, 3, let's say I'll go 3 rows down. Then I'll right click and insert 3 rows above. Then click here in A1. I'm going to go back here and get the description that we had. Apple C for copy. Come back to sheet 1. Apple V for paste, and I'll make it a little bit bigger so that we can read it. Actually, I'll zoom the whole sheet so that we can see the sheet. I can bring the size back down. All right, so does the grade of the borrower determine interest rate? Our pivot table is still here, but we have to click on this square to make the pivot table builder come back. All right, so let's test the hypothesis. On this pivot table builder, the two most important cells are the ones down here, the row labels and the sum values. You might end up using the other two for more complicated queries, but you'll always use row labels and sum values. So in this case, we're saying that grade determines interest rate. So we find the grade field here. There it is. I'll drag that down to the row label. And you can see that it actually shows me all the different grades that were there, A through G. And then interest rate over here, I'll drag into sum values. And unfortunately, it literally summed the values. That's the kind of subtotal it created, where I really wanted an average. So to change the type of subtotal, click on the little I next to that field and change it from sum to average. And now we'll have the average interest rate, which is good, but it's still not pretty. So to make it pretty, I'm going to highlight all these interest rates and then come over here and click on percent to format them as a percent, and then I'll add some decimal points since they are interest rates. All right, now as you look at it, you're able to answer the question. Does the grade of borrower determine interest rate? It sure does look like there's a relationship. Higher grade borrowers, in other words, someone with an A, gets a low interest rate, whereas borrowers that graded out low, a G, get a very high interest rate. So the hypothesis is supported, and that's what we'd state. So we click back on this field and then start typing. The hypothesis is supported. Higher grade borrowers receive lower interest rates. Hit enter. Now unfortunately it didn't take it all because we have to wrap text, so I'm going to click back on that and click up here to wrap text, and then I'm going to stretch out this row so that all the text will fit. Let's try to wrap. There we go. And now we've got it. I don't know why it's indented also. Let me see if I can push that back over. There, that looks better. Okay. Now we're also asked to graph. And so what I want to do is highlight just the data, not the grand total, because that'll mess up the graph. So I'm highlighting the data, and then I'm coming over to charts, and I'll pick a column chart, the clustered column, and that creates a nice chart showing the same thing, but the chart is not properly formatted. So we come over here and pick one of the chart formats. I'll pick layout number 1. That's fine because that gives us a chart title. And on the chart title, I'm going to repeat the title here, grade v rate. I'll get rid of the legend because there really is only one series. You don't need a legend. And then the last thing that we need to do down here is rename this tab. So I'm going to click down here on sheet 1, double click on sheet 1 and type grade v rate. And now I've completed this portion of the assignment. So for the next pivot table, I'd go back to Loan Stats, start a brand new pivot table, same way that I did before, back to the Data tab, manually insert a pivot table, and then it will create it in a brand new tab, and that's where I'll do the next assignment, the next piece. So good luck to you.